UFC 214, Jon Jones came back from a 1-year suspension to defeat DC for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship belt. And that victory really solidified himself as not only the greatest light heavyweight champion ever, but one of the greatest fighters of all time, if not the greatest. Unfortunately, news broke out today that Jon Jones has tested positive for anabolic steroids. Now, as I've stated earlier, Jones was coming back from a 1-year suspension. He previously failed out of competition drug test before UFC 200, before his rematch with DC at that time. He tested positive for estrogen blockers. Now, ironically, estrogen blockers are the same thing that Brock Lesnar tested for, but estrogen blockers, it's not an anabolic steroid, but supposedly it is used to mask steroids. It helps to mitigate their side effects. Supposedly it can restart natural testosterone production. Jon Jones, he was in tears. He absolutely denied it at a press conference. He said that it was a tainted supplement. He blamed it on a sex pill. Now, obviously, Jones being a young man, a lot of people did not buy that story, especially DC. He just blasted him. He called Jon Jones a cheater, which Jon Jones denied. He was angry. He was upset that his character was being attacked and not his skill. Now, Jones did beat DC, and it was the ultimate redemption story for Jon Jones. He came back after all the troubles he's been outside the octagon. He came back and he won. It was a great, happy redemption story for everyone. But this news is devastating to his career, to his legacy. He tested positive for estrogen blockers, suspended for 1 year. That is a stain on his legacy right there. But he was still able to overcome it with his victory, and nobody was really talking about that. But with this, everything he's done in his career is probably going to come into question. This kind of validates what DC has been saying, because he's been calling Jon Jones a cheater, right? And in that fight, he was doing very well in the first 2 rounds against Jon Jones, and now the guy that he just lost to tested positive for steroids. So in my opinion, this is the worst thing that could have happened in his professional career. If he got caught smoking weed or doing coke or whatever the case it may be, that wouldn't have mattered to me as much. Who cares if he's doing drugs? Who cares if he's smoking weed or doing cocaine and all this stuff? But steroids, again, this kind of taints his entire legacy. Everything he's achieved in his career is going to come into question because of this, and that's really a shame, honestly. But it is what it is at the end of the day. Now, from the Jones camp, they absolutely denied it, but at the same time, they can't go back to the sex pill story, right? It has to be something else. So most likely what's going to happen from here is that Jones is going to have his B samples tested, right? There's always 2 samples, A and B. His initial sample came back positive. Most likely, most fighters do what they do is have their B samples tested. Now, I can't recall ever a time where the B sample came back something different from the A sample. Usually the B sample confirms what the original sample tested for. Jones has not been stripped of his belt. We're kind of waiting until everything is done, everything is processed, but most likely he will be stripped of his belt. And most likely he will be suspended for 2 years minimum. Under USADA, first-time offenders for anabolic steroid users, 2-year automatic suspension. If this is the second, 2 or more times you've been in trouble with USADA, the suspension could be longer. So they might look to his 1-year suspension with estrogen blocker. They might give him 3 years or even 4 years. So that's going to be really bad for not only for Jon Jones, but for the UFC. The UFC really needs Jones right now. They need his star power. Ronda's gone, Lesnar's gone, Conor, he's out there boxing with Floyd, so I don't know if he's going to come back. And what's going to happen with the belt? Well, obviously if he's stripped, DC will be reinstated as champion, because that win is going to be turned into a no contest. And this sucks for Jon Jones, because I remember when he first tested positive for estrogen blockers, he said that being labeled as someone who cheat hurts more than anything else I've been through in my entire career. And that was just with estrogen blockers. He broke all sorts of records in a very positive way, but now he's breaking records in the other direction. He's now the first fighter to be stripped of his belt 3 times. The first time being a hit and run incident, second time being the estrogen blocker, and now this 3rd time, if he gets stripped, it will be for steroids. So So hopefully we'll see how everything goes. Again, nothing is official, but like I said, if history is an indication to anything, this is how it's going to go. That's the news right now. We'll see how everything goes. Obviously, this is shocking in the sport of mixed martial arts, especially for the UFC. And I think we'll wait and see what other news comes out of this.